Without doubts, I think it's by far the best league in the world.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League? Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American.
We are at our last team of previews over here, gentlemen, and it is the Wolves. There's a lot of movements in some ways. There was a lot of loans. There's a lot of players from Portugal. Let's go with you, Gally, and start with them. They had kind of like a weird season last year in terms of sometimes you thought, they were going to go downhill. Sometimes they had like a good run going. It was kind of like up and down. I wouldn't say the more consistent. They were never in danger or anything like that. But where do you see them after the changes, like the incomings and outgoings now? Which direction do you see them going?
Neutral. I mean, honestly, I think they're stuck in neutral, and I think they have been for a couple of years. I think Bruno Lage actually did a great job last year. He came into the league. People kind of joked about his pedigree and what he had done. He was 1 year Benfica's top manager, and he was the Benfica 2 manager for a year. And he gets this big job, and you're like, well, he was qualified. He speaks Portuguese. And he really had an identity, though, that helped them, even though I thought their defensive stability was weakened because, Boley didn't play. They were down a few players. You lose Jimenez all year. It was a horrific injury that Jimenez went through when he had the collision with David Luiz. And, hitting heads with anyone would be terrible. Hitting heads with David Luiz is probably like the worst thing that could happen to a human because you come out of your stew and David Luiz is looking over at you with that crazy ass hair. It probably was something as crazy as knowing that your skull was cracked in 4 different places. He doesn't look like the same footballer. And he's hurt again. And he just, and to me, that's a huge loss for them. I love the Pedro Neto coming back. I like some of the signings that they've made, but I don't really know that they've done enough work right now to improve. And I just look back at that first and second years in the Premier League under Nuno and think, I know it wasn't going well, but you had an identity and you had players that played to a system and a manager who also spoke Portuguese. So therefore, he was qualified to stick around maybe a little longer. And I think they pulled the plug too early, and I think the project has been set back a long way because of it.
What do you think, Bickler?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Galliot. They're stuck in neutral. I think that when I look at them, I think like Cody and Neves is the start to a nice spine. But I think so much of their identity in the past has been wrapped up in Jimenez and the fact that he's hurt again and doesn't look anywhere near the player he was pre-injury last year. Like, I think that they're going to have to find another identity moving forward. Outside of the bottom 3 teams that got relegated, they had the worst expected goal differential or expected goal output of any of the sides. So they're just, not only do they not look necessarily great going forward, they're just not even getting anything on frame right now consistently. So they've got to figure out what they want that thing to look like defensively, offensively. Defensively, they've always been fairly sound. They had moments last year where they struggled, but I think that was mostly through injury. So yeah, they've got to really sort out the offensive side of things if they're going to sort of improve upon last year and get back into that mid-table. Otherwise, I think they are really going to struggle this year.
Is it a matter of not being able to replace some of the players they lost? Or, I mean, why do you think where the inconsistency comes from, Gally?
Well, I mean, they got Adama Traore back, so just talk about inconsistency on inconsistency. I mean, you want to talk about a guy who's inconsistent. He's just consistently fast, and everything else is, 50-50.
And
right? I mean,
it's shiny.
Yeah. Oh, he's shiny, all right. I mean, and again, if I had arms like that, I'd show him off. Because I have arms like I do, I keep them out of the screen. But, it's one of these things when it comes to Traore, when it comes to that side, they need goals, right? Like Paul mentioned Neves. They still roll out João Moutinho, classy player, technical.
45.
He's 155, like literally. Like it's ridiculous. I think he was 45 when he was at Monaco. Like it doesn't make any sense. And at the same time, they need him to play because they don't strengthen in these areas. And then when they spend money, right? They go and sign last year Fabio Silva. They buy this, record signing, young 19-year-old striker from Benfica. Maybe they should have bought the guy with the last name Nunez. Instead, they bought a guy who played on the youth team and had never scored a professional goal. And then we're surprised when he couldn't score professional goals in the toughest league in the world. And the kid's been loaned out, I think, to either the Dutch or it might even be like a lesser league than that.
I think it was Belgium. Was it?
The Jupiler League?
Like
Anderlecht, yes, Belgium.
And this might be great for the club, right? He might get the experience he needs. He might play. They bought Huang, and then they made that signing permanent. Looked like a little bit of breath of fresh air. But you spend all that money on a young kid, and you send him out on loan in his second season at your club after having a failed first season. And it feels like a either go figure it out somewhere else or this won't work type of a thing. And I think that's why I say they're stuck in neutral. I don't feel like they ever make a step forward. They buy Altonori. He looks like a really good player. And then they sell Vinagre for nothing. Like they have talent and they just don't seem to ever foster it. They loan out their best players, in my opinion, and they bring back guys who just aren't Premier League quality. And I just think they don't have a goal scorer that's going to keep them anywhere near where their ambition should be. Because they were on the cusp of being the side that we talked about earlier in this program in West Ham that was challenging for a top 4 spot or at least a European spot. I mean, they played in the quarterfinals of the Europa League when Nuno was there. They had a deep run because they were talented and deep and had great upcoming players. They sold them and they didn't buy properly. And they hired a manager that kind of feels Nuno light. And that doesn't work in this league, in my opinion.
Is it a matter of, I almost feel like, they had that team and, they were like, hey, we found something over here, like something is working, and they almost outdid it. Like bought too many of those like young players that might turn out. And I think, we talked about this in the past about sometimes too many changes is not necessarily good. And like you're saying, Gali, I think sometimes they've loaned out the wrong. Is it just a matter of like bad financial decisions or bad scouting decisions, Bickler, where they loaned out the guy that maybe they should have been more patient with and grown themselves? Or is it just like, they keep casting these nets out there saying, like, let's get this 20-year-old, 21-year-old, 23-year-old, potential really good guys, and then not giving them enough of a patience and maybe like an environment to actually become the stars that, they're meant to be when they sign them?
Yes. I think, yeah, like, listen, Fabio Silva, that kind of money at 20 years old shouldn't be out on loan. You've committed financially to it. You're married to it. Okay. So you're in a committed relationship with that player. You keep him there. You foster that. You figure it out. He at least needs to be playing and training with the first team. Okay. Like to me, a loan makes no sense in that situation. I think the difference between this Wolves team and the last Wolves team that was great, like 3 years ago, is the fact that they just don't have an offensive identity. I sound like a broken record, but I really think it just comes down to the quality up front. Like we looked at, even when they were firing, like even when they didn't have Jota, they had they had a fully fit Jimenez that was firing on all cylinders with Potence off him as a second striker. Like they had some attacking flair and some bite to it. With Jimenez out, they just don't. I think Neto back helps them for sure. I think that helps them. I think like Neto to me is Jota 2.0. Like he's like sort of a bastardized junior version of that player. Like I think they can do similar things, but it's just to me they just don't have that firepower up front. And no matter what you put behind it in this league, if you can't score goals, you're going to be mid-table and lower.
So give me something positive over here, Gally, because it does not sound very positive so far. Give me something that a Wolves fan can say, yeah, but we got this going.
Morgan Gibbs White might play the false nine, and that's about as negative of a positive as you can have. I mean, really, when it comes down to it, you mentioned earlier, we joke about the Portuguese connections, we joke about the manager, right? We joke about loaning the wrong players out. I think their biggest issue is that they're basically run by an agent. Because Jorge Mendes basically has ownership in Wolves, and he just sends his players there. But then he also decides when he doesn't want his players to be playing there anymore, like a Vinagre, and he gets them moved, and then he gets the big move to PSG after a loan out in Porto. So I just feel, to Paul's point, they make the wrong moves. They loan out the wrong players. They keep the wrong players. They need Jimenez to find his scoring boots. He needs to score 10 to 15 goals. And to Paul's point, Neto has to be their best player, in my opinion. And Podence has to create. And he has flashes where he looks like the little number 10, that every little Portuguese club wants, right? Like a guy who pulls the string, plays behind the real tall striker, and creates all the goals for everyone. They need that, because when Neto was firing, I felt like they did have an offensive identity that was actually even better than when Jota was there playing in the front two. Because we all talk about their front three, but Jota really played in the front two with Jimenez when he was there. Yeah. And I think they need to get back to that with Jimenez and Wang, and figuring out a way to also mix in Neto and Podence playing behind them. And if they can do that and stay healthy, it might work. But I might also learn how to speak Portuguese and might become an assistant coach.
I was just going to say, I don't think they'll do it. I don't think they'll do it, but if they could figure out a way to commit to Huang, I think he's a player. I think there's a player there, and I think he can score goals, which is something they need. They just seem to give him time. He doesn't do well. They put him in. He doesn't do well. They put him in. He does well. Then they don't play him again. It's like whenever I feel like he starts to get some traction, they don't start him the following match. I think if they can find some consistency with him, I think there's a player there for them that can score goals.
So having said that, and not finding a lot of positives, a lot of ifs, I mean, it almost sounds like we're on the same page where they're going to go as far as Jimenez can take him, at least offensively, because they do well on defense and they will not concede a lot of goals. I mean, they've given, top teams a run for their money, and having it's, one of those teams that's really tough to break down defensively. But if you're not going to be able to score goals, you're not going to get a lot of 3 points and get points in chunks. Bickler, where do you have them finishing the season?
15 through 17, I think, realistically for me. I think they're going to be in some trouble. I think they're good enough defensively to scrape out a relegation, but I think it's going to be ugly for a large portion of the year.
How about you, Gally? Give him some hope here.
Yeah. There's no hope here. It's similar. Your number one signing isn't a Portuguese kid, so which means he can't even understand the game plan. You bought an Englishman from Burnley who's got 11 career appearances. I mean, literally, that was their big buy, was a center back. They lost Roman Saiz, who didn't have a great year, but he's a goal threat. He offered something different for them. He was a good defender and gave them, opportunities on set pieces going forward, could play out wide. I think they're weaker at fullbacks. I think they're weaker at center back. And as good as Connor Cody is, and I think he's a great leader, the only way they stay up is in that 16, 15 range. And that's honestly because they have one of the top 5 shot-stopping goalkeepers in the whole Premier League. And if it wasn't for Sa last year, they might have been in trouble last year at times. So I think their defense all hinges on the keeper and Cody at the heart of that defense. That'll be enough to keep them up, but it's not enough to get them anywhere near the top half of the table.
I agree. I think they will be in a battle. I don't know if it's going to get ever dangerous. I just have a lot of faith in terms of like how they play as a team where they're going to be able to consistently get at least those single points and draws to be able to stay up. But it will be a challenge for them. I was personally more than shocked with Collins's price tag of like 27 million pretty much from a team
Crazy.
that got relegated, which is I thought it was like shocking in terms of how much they paid for him, and I don't know why. I mean, I know he's a young talent, but like you're saying, Gally, you didn't buy a lot of experience, and you're bringing him onto this team. Yeah, like I say, I don't think they will be in danger of relegation, but they will be close to that zone, hovering above it. So, not a lot of we didn't paint a great picture over here, but it's not as bad, I guess, when there's no relegation battle. But that is our preview for the Wolves.